Welcome to the National Leprechaun Museum talking video. My name is Deirdre and I am here with the wonderful, with the most amazing person who has ever existed, Mr. Paudie Holly.
Hello interwebs! How we all doing? It's good to see you, you're looking well.
People don't usually get a wink from Paudie, so you must be in a good mood.
Oh, I am. I'm in a very good mood. We were at the beach only the other day. We got loads of sun and loads of good company and lots of sweets.
Lots of sweets, and you can probably tell lots of new freckles and lots of new burnt skin on us as well.
Yeah, because we have Irish skin. So we're very red at the moment.
Yeah. I did a very smart thing and I put sun cream on my face, but I forgot to put it everywhere else, and then of course I get crisped everywhere else. But we're not here to talk about our summer holidays, no. We're here to talk about some of the great trainers and teachers that you'd find throughout Irish mythology. But before we kick off and do an analysis on some of our favourite people from mythology, have you got a favourite teacher from school or a favourite teaching memory?
I was thinking about this because when we first thought of doing talking teachers, I was thinking about it. My favourite teacher was an Irish teacher, I think, Mr. Kazan. Mr. Kazan used to have funny little phrases like jamming your socks.
Oh.
And he'd use it as both, as an instance of real difficulty, but also of real joy and pleasure. Oh, that's jamming your socks now, that is. As if it was both pleasant and horrible.
Oh, well, you just have to worry about the tone he uses it in.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's jamming the sock, not socking the jam.
How about you? Who's your favourite teacher?
It would be my Irish teacher as well, funny enough. Claire Markey. She still is a headmaster to a Gaeltacht in Galway, but she was known to have been a sergeant in her past careers.
Oh wow!
That was a rumour that went around our school because she had a very short haircut, but she was a very strict and disciplined teacher. But she was also one of the kindest teachers you would ever have in our school. And she also introduced me to Peg Sayers. So Peg Sayers, who was a storyteller who came from the Blasket Islands, she she didn't write a book. Her stories were recorded and put to page to traumatise leaving certificate students for decades. And on my time doing my leaving cert, which a lot of students are doing at the moment, was one of the last years to cover Peg Sayers and the life of Peg Sayers and her stories as a part of the leaving cert. And only a few of us actually in the museum remember the would you call them uplifting stories of Peg Sayers?
No. Being quite honest with you. Yeah. She had a tough life. In my day though, it was Mike Deneen O'Shea.
Oh.
Not Peg. It was Mike Deneen was went to England to work on the building sites and America as well, and became a driver of a creamery lorry, and basically he told his entire life off Squelga, and in various parts it was quite funny.
Oh, lovely. And
it was also humorous to see the ways that in the Gaeltacht there are Englishy Irish words. The most famous is mowicycle. Yeah, because when you're in school in Ireland they teach you that the word for bicycle in Irish is rucker, but then you go to the Irish speaking part and they say things like mowicycle.
Yeah. And when you hear you're riding mowicycle all the way back home, it's something else. But what I love following about their stories, they're kind of like biographical stories through storytelling, is that they really do show you what life was like for them, and it was like kind of the best way to demonstrate, look, this is how we do things. But especially when it came to the act of telling stories or having little side tangents within those books, you really do learn a lesson from just their life and how it's so different to ourselves.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Exactly.
Because we were discussing it before, about which teacher, if you had to pick any person from Irish mythology, who would you want as a certain teacher for a certain subject as well?
I think you should take the credit for this, because you had a great idea this morning. You basically said that we should have an imaginary school.
Yes, imaginary.
This is our imaginary school, and we're going to pick characters from Irish folklore and mythology. Some of them were obviously teachers in the story, but others we just think are perfectly suited for the role of a teacher.
Or we might have substitute teachers. Yeah. So we think that they'd be good at the same, like two people would be good at the same job, but in very different ways. But I like the idea of, it feels like we're in the middle of a staff meeting right now. Because we both have kind of sort of teaching experience in our...
we do. Yeah. We're at the conference table here as well. Yeah. Let's start, as we used to start the day back in my primary school days, let's start with our Irish teacher, Finnegas.
I didn't know how that was going to go. I thought we were going to say a prayer. Like,
no,
which Irish school do you go to?
No, on the blackboard was, when I was in primary school, was laid out all of the subjects for the day.
Okay.
So let's start with our college chaplain / Irish teacher / poet, Finnegas. Would you like to tell the...
Finnegas was the man who helped Fionn McCool but basically learn about the salmon of knowledge. And if it wasn't for Finnegas and his years of teaching to Fionn McCool himself, he wouldn't have understood that the magic or the wisdom of the world that ran through the salmon itself. And when Finnegas sat down with Fionn and found out that Fionn had burnt his finger on the salmon of knowledge, they ended up sharing the fish together, which, although it's a person who's taking away your life's dream and they're going to become the smartest man in the country, when that fate thought it was for you, I always have a little bit of sympathy towards Finnegas, because he knew he was going to be in the presence of the wisest person in Ireland, but unfortunately it wasn't him.
That's true. Yeah. Finn was at a very vulnerable stage in their life, because obviously his father had been murdered by Gulmach Moorna, because the father had basically fallen in love with a woman he shouldn't have, and her father didn't approve, and he ran away with her. And so he was murdered for taking a bride that he shouldn't have taken. So I just think of all of those teachers in my life who were there at particularly tough family moments, who really, handled it very well, and handled tough moments in schools all the time, and have to be there when kids are dealing with death for the first time and that kind of thing.
Because you do forget, it's not just like generating homework monsters. Teachers do have a personal side and a personal touch, and really are the caregiver when it comes to it, because it's not just teaching children a lesson, it really is help shape them. I know myself, my dad had a teacher when he was about 9, great storyteller himself, a great lover of history, and that transported over to my dad and a few of his friends, and still to this day, decades later, they can remember exactly what stories and exactly what books were told. But for Finnegas himself, just to go back to the stories of him, he was a poet who had trained for 7 years?
He'd been 7 years fishing.
7 years fishing, that was,
poets and druids trained for a very long time, because everything is done without the written word.
Yes.
What Owen was there is used for secret messages and has a very high religious meaning. So he didn't use it for ordinary everyday things, like the history of a clan. So a poet has to be able to tell off the top of his head, who your great grandfather was, and what battle they were involved in, and what poems they feature in. So training to be a poet would have been a very arduous thing, and you would have trained your memory, because you can't open a book, and it's not really about just writing a few fancy lines. It's about recounting the history of a clan in poem and song, you know, and being able to tell the king what his great great grandfather was up to.
I remember researching into like techniques of the Druids, these very knowledgeable people, and the way they would learn or practice or even rehearse these stories is by lying flat on their back with a large flat stone on their stomach, and they're just repeating it over and over and over again to who, if there was another Druid listening, to pass on to the story. But to be in a dark room or a dark space and have this large flat stone on top of you, and you're recounting the king's generational family, it's just
it's mad, which, you know, really puts you in the mind more. Like, we think Finnegas was probably annoyed that Finn had just taken all of the knowledge out of the Salmon of Knowledge. Firstly, the salmon is ancient. It is the shape-shifted form of Fintan Mac Bachra, the first man in Ireland, and it had eaten of the 9 hazel seeds in the well of wisdom. So that whole thing is building up over the thousands of years. Finnegas spent 7 years fishing, should I say, and maybe 21 years training. And all Finn has to do is burn his thumb on the Salmon of Knowledge, and Finnegas is no good to him anymore as a teacher. You know, that must have been heart-wrenching, really.
Oh gosh, yeah. It's
I like in my teaching days there was, you know, there's always a know-it-all in the class.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, and it can drive you nuts. But imagine if you were a teacher, a mentor to someone who just all of a sudden became the wisest person in the world. It would have been it would have been quite annoying.
I think that must be the fear of most teachers as well. They were like, what kind of monster have I truly created?
Am I going to be cut out?
Yeah.
It must be particularly maths teachers must find that a bit rough.
So we have our arts department sorted. We've got Finnegas, who's going to be taking care of a little bit of poetry, a little bit of passing the knowledge, but
maybe before now, because I didn't run this by you beforehand, so this is a bit of a surprise because it's only hitting me now. But maybe for our Béarla, because Béarla, when I was in primary school, when the English was always written Béarla on the blackboards, Béarla teacher, we should go with Eamon Kelly.
Oh,
actor and a man extraordinaire, weaver of the English language into many mystical forms.
What we have encountered is a bypass, because a Kerryman is suggesting a Kerryman, and Paudie knows my feelings towards not only Eamon Kelly, don't get me wrong, an artist at work and a beautiful Shanachie, but he wouldn't necessarily be one of my favourites.
No.
There is Eddie Linehan, the Shanachie from Clare, or originally from Kerry. No. Yeah. You see, you have Eamon Kelly, I've got Eddie Linehan, who now resides in County Clare as a Shanachie and a dialect master. So, and he did have teaching, he was a teacher for a couple of decades. But tell me why Eamon Kelly would be your Béarla teacher.
I just think of the ways that he formed that Hiberno English, which is what we call the dialect of English spoken in Ireland. The forms that he moved that in were really, really special. And he's that kind of, he would have been that kind of inspirational English teacher that everyone loved, I think. Maybe Eddie would perhaps have been the English teacher who took it all very seriously. And, you know, I imagine Eamon Kelly as being like Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society, you know, open up your books and tear out the front page.
I just imagine Eamon Kelly giving a class in the middle of a pub. I can't see him without a glass of whiskey or a glass of water in his hand.
Sitting beside the fire.
Exactly, wearing the hat. Yeah. And I can't see him transposed into a classroom. I see him giving a class inside of a pub.
Yeah.
Doing
it all from the chair.
I'd say he'd only reference his work as well and his books. because you've got the storyteller book. He's done a couple of kids' books, and
Eamon Kelly would give no homework because then he'd have to correct it.
So we've sorted out our Irish teacher, our English teacher, Roberta. We've also come to terms with the bit of sociology and drama teacher we have. Now, my favourite subject and skill was the art. Textile, crafting, woodwork, metalwork. Who would be some of your go-to people when thinking of crafting?
Well, you're lucky in Irish folklore because the gods were quite fluid in the Irish understanding. So pretty much every god had a little bit of craftiness to them. Every god made a certain thing, whether it was gifts or forged stuff. So Bridget and Lou are probably the go-to gods for making things in the forge, making swords and spears and that kind of thing.
I feel like Bridget would be a dream woman to have on your side, because not only could she help with the craft of the blacksmithing and also making sure that the fires are always going, but she'd also know how to make her own homemade beer.
Yes.
And she'd be the best one at a teacher party, or the best one.
Yes.
You know, when you go to your debs or your formal dance at the end of your school time, and you turn around to the teachers and you're like, actually, you're a better crack. You're better, much more fun when I get to see you on the dance floor or having a couple of pints than seeing you in the classroom and you're giving out to me. You know, that moment of you realise, oh yeah, teachers like to go to the pub as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. You know, for viewers who are unfamiliar with the stories, when Bridget evolved, shall we say, if Bridget was a Pokemon, Bridget phase 2 was she went from a goddess to a Catholic saint. When she was a Catholic saint, she did a recreation of Christ's famous miracle at the wedding of Cana. She transformed water transformed her bath water, I believe, into beer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know what that says about her hygiene.
Well, needless to say,
something quite yeasty perhaps going on there. But eventually her bath water became beer anyway.
We are not making a yeast joke and not mentioning Bridget. Bridget is a force. You do not mention hygiene.
True, I might be
Bridget.
struck down.
Yes,
on the
please
way
don't
home.
do that, okay? So Bridget.
Yes.
She, as one would say, would evolve, right, like a Pokemon.
Yeah.
So there was a story of her in Christianity at a wedding, wasn't there?
I don't remember that one. I remember the bathwater one.
Yeah, that's the one.
Is this a wedding as well, right? Yeah.
I knew it was a wedding.
Her father tried to marry her off a few times and it didn't work.
Oh no.
Yeah, there was the one that, you know, the famous story of the where she plucks out the eyes. So she plucks out her own eyes, so she can't be married, and they miraculously grow back.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Little did her suitors know that she had her own power of healing, and it could bring it back. But I have this theory that Dagda, that father figure of the Tuatha Dé Danann, that Zeus figure, if you want to call it, should rightfully be the principal of this imaginary mythological folklore school.
Yeah.
And that Bridget, who is the daughter of Dagda, would know able to calm Dagda down every so often.
Yeah, she'd be vice, because the Dagda would be a fine leader, but not a very good administrator.
Yes. I'd say he'd be great. He could even use the school bell, because he could use his cauldron of plenty, and he'd have his club, and he can use that as the school bell. That's what I have in my mind as well.
And Bridget, who has the cult and the convent, would be an organised. Both of them would be a good option for vice principal, I think. Yeah.
And nearly every school in Ireland, or not every school, but nearly every county in Ireland has at least 3 schools dedicated to Bridget as well. Especially when you go down to Kildare, it's just Bridget everywhere.
Yeah.
Since when she was Christianised, was the patron saint there.
Your textiles kind of art teacher, I think, would be Bírog from the story The Birth of Lou and various other stories as well. There's a couple, the cape helps her fly, I believe. Yeah, her cape helps her fly through the sky. So she has managed to make a cape that gives you the power of flight. And then there's the story of Lou's nappy, the one where the safety pin falls out of the nappy and forms two legs. That's one hell of a nappy and a safety pin.
Oh.
Yeah.
And you don't want Lou to be the geography teacher of the school then, no?
Lou Lawfather as a geography teacher, I don't know about that.
You could just have Lou standing in front of the board, his very long arm going like this, and just he wouldn't need a pointer, he would just have like
very
this.
Literally, yeah.
That would be my idea of Lou as the teacher. And he'd be right next to the loo because that's where he had to dispose of the nappy.
Yeah.
So it would be fine. Alright. Well, I have this little fantasy of mine is that Dean Kiecht is the, would you say, holistic medicine, the first aider, if you will, but the not so talented first aider of the situation of the school itself, because he had. He tried his best when it came to the likes of Nuada and the Silver Arm.
Yeah.
To try to mend it in battle. Is that too much of a long stretch from Lou to Nuada?
Maybe you could put him as the first aider in the school, but also the metalwork teacher.
There we go.
I had a metalwork teacher in secondary school, Mr. Dorr, and great.
Dorr.
Yeah, Dorr was his second name.
Oh,
yeah. You can imagine the jokes that came out of that. Mr. Dorr was the metalwork teacher, and of course Dean Kiecht, the physician to the gods, makes a silver arm for Nuada, and that's how Nuada became Nuada of the Silver Arm. After the second battle of Moytura or the first? No, the second. Second. And Miach, then his son, comes along and manages to grow Nuada a new arm instead.
I've heard two versions, that he can find the original arm on the battlefield, and then there was another version I read where he could basically transform the silver into flesh again. Yeah. For that.
And then there was you could say that in our imaginary school, the school scandal would be when the metalwork teacher murders the local doctor. His son.
Oh, it's kind of a bit Poirot now, and I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I didn't even think about having the drama in the school. I was just thinking of the teachers.
I think every generation of school kids has that one incident in their school where there was big drama for the whole thing.
Oh yeah.
We had a lot of big drama in our school over the years, but then when you grow up in the country, big drama causes a big stir.
Oh, indeed. And they're the best stories. So we have Mr. Dorr. So instead of him having, let's pretend that Nuada didn't have a silver arm but had a door instead. Then there is the up and coming son, who unfortunately sorry, I'll say that again.
The up and coming son would have been the former student that everybody is compared to.
So we have found the student who's being a little bit too chirpy and is being a bit too asking too many questions and then overthrows the teacher.
Yeah.
And okay, so we have Miach, who I just love that story of Miach. There is the struggle between the father not accepting that the son is a better medical man, if you will, for a better way of putting it, and in the time of the two of they then, in the setting of this story, there was a well that could cure you of all ails except for decapitation, and this is what Dean Kiecht did to his own son, but chopped the head off, and the body turned into flowers and herbs, and every remedy, every cure to every ailment you could have imagined was just at the feet of Dean Kiecht. And Ermid, the sister, who's only a few steps away, tried her best to try to figure out what all of these plants were. But Dean Kiecht being
jealous.
Just a tad. But I know you have a different perspective on the story of him maybe not being jealous. But being so outraged by all of these remedies and cures that he did not find himself, he decided to just destroy all of them. And this left Ermed, the sister of Miach, to look and search for whatever plants she could find after, because she couldn't remember the order, she couldn't remember, so we could have had the remedy to every ailment, to every war she could have on your body, to every sight imaginable. And that story after the Second Battle of Mathora has always been a favourite. But I feel describing a story that big and to form it as a story to tell, you'll need at least half an hour to get into the ins and the outs.
It is a proper soap opera, the whole thing.
Completely. Completely.
And then for our imaginary home ec teacher, we have Bovmal.
The way you said it reminded me of Bovril.
It's the Irish alphabet again. You don't.
Yeah.
You lose confidence halfway through saying the word. So you just go.
We had very good teachers in school.
Yeah.
Very good teachers.
Bothmell, of course, Finn McCool is his father is murdered. Yeah, and he is fostered out to his aunt and her friend, who we'll talk about a little bit later on. But Bothmell is the druidess. Yeah, people often forget that druids in Ireland aren't all men.
Yeah.
It's male and female. And Bothmell is one of Finn McCool's trainers, and I just see her as the kind of the home economics teacher teaching him cures.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I'd like to compare the story to that of Leprechaun, who's the caregiver in Deirdre the Sorrows.
Yeah.
When Deirdre's forced into hiding, she learns things through Leprechaun, be it the herbs, be it what the world is like, and also the different types of birds, particularly the mention of the crows and the ravens and the like.
Yeah.
But what do you think her emphasis would be on compared to Leprechaun's?
Bothmell's would be a very kind of practical, what is it good for? I'm teaching a warrior and he needs to survive.
Yeah.
So what am I teaching him to? I think every child should do home economics. I didn't do it myself, but I think every child should have done a thing where they're taught how to cook.
Even if it's just beans on toast.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a tin of salmon.
There's nothing worse than going to college and not knowing how to cook. And being left on your own and having chicken goujons 5 nights a week.
It wasn't chicken goujons, it was corn dinosaurs.
Corn
Yes.
Nice.
But I understand where you're coming from.
But you're not wrong to look at the word Bothmell and go, that's strange. Because
no, I'm just a fat child who compares everything to food. It may not be chicken nuggets, but look at it.
Well, of course, the geographers and the translators of Irish history took one look at it and that looks like Bloom, doesn't it? And that's where we get the Slieve Bloom Mountains. Yeah, that looks big, even though all of the L's are at the end of the word. Yeah, so.
One thing that I was always curious about was where the name Demna came from, because obviously Fionn.
Yeah, it means certainty. So I think certainty. Finn McCool's first name. Finn is his nickname because his hair goes prematurely grey and it means kind of fair-haired. His original name was Demna, and Demna means certainty. And I think the certainty is that his father was so certain he was in love with his mother. Yeah. Even though
the fair neck.
Yeah, her of the fair neck. Yeah. That she named him certainty because he ran out. It was very strange in ancient Ireland to not have the father's approval for a marriage.
Yeah.
Because, well, firstly you had to pay a bride price.
Yeah.
So the dads are essentially auctioning off their daughters. Yeah. And to leave without paying the bride price or getting the approval of the father was very strange for culturally. So I'm not surprised she named her son something in relation to that.
Yeah.
But
So we have sorted out the English, the Verla, the Irish teacher, the historians, thanks to the Shanachie and storytellers, although we're a little bit decided on that. Yeah. We have the Dagda as the principal, but the Dagda was a great lover of food, lover of porridge, and was well known for having a really healthy size. Yes. And something I share with the Dagda is that I absolutely hated PE or any kind of fitness class.
Me too.
Because I was not a sports player. Were you a sports player?
No, definitely not. We played a lot of indoor soccer in our school, and that just definitely wasn't for me. It was, I get anxious just looking at a football.
Yes.
I love the GAA and I love rugby, but I couldn't follow the rules most of the time. I don't know what the rules of most of them are.
But as long as you remember what the rules to some of the Telltale games were, and as long as you remember what some of the rules to hurling is, so we can follow a Cuchulainn or follow a Fianna story, no problem.
I was more of a Fitchel player. They're on my own in the corner of school, playing myself in ancient Irish chess.
In your robes, in your gym robes, with an Adidas stripe down the side. Yeah. Oh, I like that. Oh, God.
Yeah. So for our two PE teachers, we have the two famous trainers from the trainers of our warrior heroes. So our two most famous warrior heroes are Cuchulainn and Finn McCool, and their trainers were both women. Now, if that seems surprising to you, considering the kind of chauvinism of ancient Irish mythology, we think that in really old stories, these were goddesses. So it's essentially the warrior going to a goddess to be trained, rather than just another lady. But women are badass and they can.
Exactly.
They're martial arts teachers.
One thing about stories that you must always have into the back of your head is, what is the perspective? What is the narrative that this teller is trying to say? Because when it came to shaping stories and telling stories, for some, they were goddesses or martial arts teachers, and then for others, they were just, it's just a woman who lives on the island of Skye. It's a woman who's connected to Scotland. Yeah. But there was something more forceful about them. Yeah. My favourite example of this is Scathoch. Scathoch, the shadowy one, Scathoch, the warrior who was, trusted by somebody. He was the father to Emer, who Cuchulainn was trying to woo, or Cuchulainn was trying to get basically in the pants off. I'm sorry for your suffering.
Don't worry, years from now we'll explain the birds and the bees too.
And the slithers and the hurdy stick. They'll be fine. But Scathoch was this absolute reckoning of a figure when it came to training great warriors. In the wooing of Emer, where Cuchulainn is trying to get with Emer because she can hold a conversation with him, they can speak in riddles. She has the power of pleasantries, the gift of beauty, the gift of craftsman and embroidery once again. But what Cuchulainn struck up with Emer, at first you think is a very special bond, and that Cuchulainn would not stray from. Although Cuchulainn had a demigod complex, I think we can all agree. And within this story, the father of Emer decided that if Cuchulainn is going to be good enough for my daughter, I can send him off to Scathoch. But little did Cuchulainn know that there was actually a series of events that would take place before Cuchulainn ever got to meet the shadowy figure, this expert in fighting, in the ways of spear fighting, in the way to hand combat. Yes. So thanks to Ferda, one of the closest allies and closest friends to Cuchulainn, they travelled over to where Scathoch was, but they met, let's call them booby traps along the way, between fogs and trips and great valleys that they tried to venture forth, but of course were soon to meet their end. But Cuchulainn being Cuchulainn, he meets Scathoch and things get very personal with them. But thanks to Scathoch, she does offer him a very impressive weapon called the Gay Bulga. And the gay bulg was seen as a club that was used, unfortunately, to fear it in the end. Spoilers. It's only been out a few thousand years. But that club, once inserted into the opponent, into the torso, little pinchers would break off, cling onto the insides of your enemy or those who you're fighting. You would twist the gay bulb and it would twist the outside. You would pull out this club and then all of the entrails of your opponent would follow suit. But that's one thing about Scathoch, is the power that she had. Yes, she had some enemies and some people that she weren't friends with, that Cuchulainn got friendly with, that Emer didn't know about till much later. But what kind of lessons do you think Scathoch would teach you? Would she be a spear fighter? Would she be the one teaching you fencing in a very posh school?
I think of all of those montages in martial arts movies where the young lad is taught first some form of ancient wisdom that just involves, you know, catching a fly out of the air or waxing a car. And then they learn from waxing the car that I imagine it was something like that. But the story is so important in the Irish imaginary that it lends its name to, you know, the Scathoch lends her name to the language. Battler or warrior is a Scathoch, and the dragon on Inishkahig or Scattery Island is also called Scathoch because she literally lent her name to that word in Irish. In one tradition as well, the gay bulg is a spear, and that is lends its word to the old Irish word for a spear. You know, the word Gaelic comes from it as well. So it's a belly spear in one tradition. So basically the spear goes in, the spikes come out, and then you twist and pull. The interesting thing about it is that she is training him how to use it not with his arms as you traditionally use a spear. She trains him to use it with his feet. So to be able to throw a spear with your foot, it was one of Scathoch's.
I have a theory about this foot throwing thing. Now I can't reference it, and it really, really irks me that I can't find it on page. You don't need
evidence for this kind of thing.
I need the evidence to prove it. But there was a theory that Cuchulainn had 6 toes.
Okay.
So
right.
is it the 6th toe power that he's able to throw the gay bulgo by his feet?
Maybe.
It's because he has the extra toe.
Maybe from 2 big toes, he could manage it.
It'll be a good way of, like, you know, the sniper rifle has the X in the little viewfinder, and he can just use the big toes and he's at it.
We all have that one friend who has like orangutan feet. You know that. Maybe that's it. Cuchulainn doesn't go alone. Of course, she trains other people. She trains Crahor and Conall Carnock, who you might remember from the story The Revenge of Mesgidre.
Yes.
Conall is a berserker. He's really intense. So she might have trained him then to, you know, go all out in battle.
Yes, definitely.
And of course, Cuchulainn has his famous rage that comes over him. She also trains the son of Aoife, her rival, because Scathoch, of course, is such a powerful warrior. She has in Irish storytelling to have an arch enemy, an arch rival, and that's her sister Aoife. And Aoife and Cuchulainn, you know, their child is Conall. Conla, should I say? Conla, who is a gasa is put on him never to tell anyone who should ask his name. So a curse is put on him, so he can't tell anyone his name. And it ends in tragedy.
Yeah, it really is such a heartbreaking story on so many levels, because he tries to come to Ireland to find out who his father truly was. But once Cuchulainn realises who it is, it's a little bit too late, because he's now holding his dead son in the water. There's so many elements to this story that makes it a real tragedy. Some that are a little bit more. There's just so many elements to it to make it such a tragic tale. A
strange warrior from Scotland arrives on the beach and refuses to tell anyone his name, and Cuchulainn becomes interested in the case, as it were.
And of course, Scathock being Conla's mother, he knows how to fight.
Aoife.
He knows.
Aoife being.
Right. And being the son of Aoife, a warrior woman in her own right, who does not get enough of the spotlight, of course he knows how to fight. Of course he knows how to take on warriors from Ireland who aren't trained up to his level.
Yeah.
And being in that world, of course, Cuchulainn always looking for the next warrior to defeat. He just didn't realise he was defeating one of his own.
Yeah.
So we have Scathock and Aoife.
But before we move on, just remember that the wooing of Emer is available in 2 versions. And in one version there are 2 teachers in Scotland. One is Donal and Donal and Scottish. And basically Donal has a very, very ugly daughter who tries to woo Cuchulainn and is very unsuccessful. And Donal becomes fed up with Finn McCool Cuchulainn as a student and sends him to Scotland. Yeah. So if you're wondering why we didn't mention Donal, it's because there's 2 versions, and the one without Donal just happens to be more famous.
Yeah, exactly. So we have Scathock and we have Aoife as the PE teachers you don't want to be on their bad side, basically, because they've been through an awful lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Who would be your PE teacher?
My PE teacher would be Leah Lucher. She would have also taught camogie, I'd say.
Yes. But camogie with the metal bit at the bottom.
Yes. And Leah Lucher and Bothwell, who we mentioned earlier on, would have been great friends. I suppose you would say, you could probably read into the way I'm saying friends what you will. There's no evidence, but that's traditionally how the 2 were seen as being partners, Leah and Bothwell. Leah was, of course, the trainer of Finn McCool in the same vein as Scathock. So again, training Finn McCool to use unconventional tactics in war. Perhaps she would have trained him to use in the use of hounds or dogs. Fighting dogs were big for the Na Fianna in their battle style, and she would have trained him from a very young age, basically getting him ready to take on the mantle as leader of Na Fianna before he was 17. Yeah. So to really pick it up there when he's in puberty, essentially preparing a young teenager as we'd see them today, but as an adult as they would have seen them, to take on the mantle of leadership.
But imagine just being to pass the afternoon, is that your caregiver would throw you into a ditch, give you a wooden spear, and then ask a few of their friends to come over with spears themselves, and you'd have to defend yourself.
Yeah, that'd be Neil Looker, who did the course that threw you in at the deep end, who gave very inspirational speeches about it.
Oh,
you know that coach that at half time starts swearing to blazes.
Oh my word, yes.
Like mad. And Leah Looker. The problem with it is that in the Fenian cycle there are 2 characters with the same name, so she tends to get overshadowed. Yeah,
there's always that crossover of you combine the 2 into one nearly, which is so not the case. Yeah. But she's just a major figure within Fionn's life. Yeah. And it's another reference to what you said earlier. It was these 2 warrior women who trained Demna or Fionn to really become the powerhouse that he is in the stories. Yes. Because a lot of people focus on the student and didn't realise the intensity of the teachers or the trainers that they have. And I'd love to know who would be the trainers of Leah Lucra. I'd love to know who the trainers of Scathock would be, because if we think...
Where did they go to teach training college?
Basically. Like, we know that these 2 teachers can be intense, but like, how bad were their other ones? Like,
but there is, like, obviously there's no university, so it's the same as how the Shanachie tradition is passed on. It's from one practitioner to the other. Yeah.
Exactly that.
Yeah, and they have to memorize all of their knowledge physically, so it has to all be in here.
Exactly. So I'm just thankful that we're not teaching any classes today.
Exactly.
Otherwise, all of this will come out at once. But thank you for spending some time with us. And as a note to say thank you to Eamon Kelly, we will not be giving homework at the end of this video.
Yes.
But I want to say thank you to Paudie for being here. And
It was a
being
pleasure,
honest.
a real pleasure, an ordeal of pleasure. It was great.
An ordeal of pleasure indeed. Wonderful, fantastic. So wherever you are, we hope you're staying safe, and we can't wait to see you in the museum where we can tell you stories face to face once again.
And if if you would like to attend our fantasy school, our imaginary school, do let us know on the Twitter or Facebook or at us anywhere. And look out for our videos and podcasts. There's a beautiful podcast featuring the lovely Deirdre here, the wooing of Emer, that was released quite recently, and there is a video coming up for the solstice.
Exactly, which will be some lovely surprises along the way. So check out the podcast on SoundCloud and Spotify and any other platforms where you get the podcast from, the talking series, and a few more surprises along the way as well.
Hope you enjoyed talking.